Up shortly, it's the Real Me with Gloria De Piero, and we'll be joined once again by our newspaper reviewers for a look at the day's big news. But first, your latest news headlines. Here's Simon.
Thanks, Simon. This is your news at 9 o'clock. New Year's Eve parties have been given the green light to go ahead in England after the government announced there will be no new restrictions before the end of the year. Hospitality bosses have welcomed the decision. However, the Health Secretary is urging people to remain cautious during celebrations. He says the government won't hesitate to introduce further restrictions if necessary. Partygoers should also take a test before any gathering and stay outside where possible to minimise the chance of infection. But political commentator Dr. John Coulter says the decision wasn't led by the science.
The situation here that the Prime Minister has decided maybe he's had enough of the Partygate scandal, so he's decided to go with the flow and let you folks in England enjoy yourselves, whilst we here in Northern Ireland and folk in Scotland and Wales, we are in what you can only describe as a semi-lockdown. So it's going to be a happy new year in England, but not so happy elsewhere.
The Home Secretary has ordered a review of the current rules surrounding crossbow ownership. It comes after a 19-year-old man was arrested at Windsor Castle on Christmas Day while allegedly in possession of the weapon. He's since been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Under current legislation, it is an offence for anyone under 18 to purchase or possess a crossbow. Royal commentator Ingrid Seward told GBNews that royal security is a difficult balance.
Part about being a member of the British royal family is to be visible and to be able to meet people and talk to ordinary people, and that is, part of the deal of being royal. So there's a very fine line, and I don't think they really enjoy, being surrounded by security all the time. But in these times, it's obviously very necessary.
Americans who catch coronavirus will now only need to isolate for 5 days. That's after US health officials cut restrictions from 10 days. At the end of 5 days, if they have no symptoms, they can return to normal activities, but must wear a mask. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say there was growing evidence people with COVID are most infectious in the 2 days before and 3 days after symptoms develop. 4 people have been killed in the US state of Colorado after a lone gunman went on a 2-hour shooting spree. Police say they exchanged fire with the man who was then shot dead in the city of Denver. 1 officer was injured in the attack. Millions are struggling to lose weight because of Britain's junk food culture. That's according to new research. The University of London has found people trying to shed the pounds are being thwarted by advertising of unhealthy food, even those trying really hard. It adds the ready availability and constant exposure to images of snacks high in fat, salt and sugar makes it difficult for dieters. England have lost the Ashes on the 3rd day of the 3rd test in Melbourne. Australia beat the tourists by an innings and 14 runs to take an unassailable 3-0 lead. This means it took only 12 days of cricket for Australia to retain the Ashes, and they'll be looking for the 5-0 victory whitewash. The 4th test begins in Sydney on January the 4th. England Test captain Joe Root reflected on the loss.
We're bitterly disappointed to find ourselves in this position. We have to, more than anything, just keep working very hard at our games, keep looking at ways to get better. And we have to make sure that when we get our opportunities to get ahead of the game, we take them.
That's your news update. I'll be back in around an hour's time with the latest headlines. Now back to Simon and Ellie.
Thanks, Simon. Joe Root looked miserable.
Yeah, really depressed.
With full reason.
But you would be, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, when you've been thrashed by Australia.
Yeah. You kind of have a similar look about you today, Simon, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but we'll have to think again about how we play.
Yeah.
Well, what about
he's soul-searching, isn't he, according to the Telegraph?
Soul-searching. He needs to be run-searching and batter-searching and...
Job searching.
Win search. Job searching too, yeah.
Yeah, I stole that joke from Simon earlier. He did that off air, so I can't even claim that one. Let's have a look at some of today's front pages. The Daily Mail leads with Boris's New Year cheer. The Mail's sources said nothing in the figures suggested that hospitals were about to be overwhelmed. It also highlighted the huge boost hospitality would get from the PM's decision.
The eye's gone for no new COVID restrictions before 2022. It says Boris Johnson made the decision after receiving pre-Christmas data. It also says that the NHS is not facing an exponential rise in hospital admissions, although it is still under pressure, made worse by thousands of workers being off sick with coronavirus.
The headline on The Times is "No COVID curbs on New Year parties." It also highlights the plight of consumers, saying household energy bills are set to double. Household.
In Scotland too.
Well, the average price of energy bills could reach more than, £1,800, according to estimates sent to Ofgem to ministers.
Well, the Express has gone for dire warning. Energy bills could double. It says soaring gas and electricity prices will cause an enormous crisis next year.
A bit of doom and gloom on the front of the Mirror. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is a no-show, according to them, despite record COVID crisis and NHS staff shortages. Uncertainty reigns, they say, even with New Year's Eve celebrations going ahead.
And on the Telegraph as well, no new restrictions on New Year's Eve. Another story on the cover is energy. Bills could triple unless a £20 billion fund is set up to help. Ministers have been warned.
And on the front of the Star, Happy New Beer, celebrating no lockdown and balmy temperatures of 15 degrees with hopefully a cold beer. And the first picture of the Windsor Castle crossbow suspect features in the paper too.
Well, let's pick up. Benjamin Butterworth from the iPaper, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire are here this morning to talk us through the front page. Scarlett, that front page of the Mirror, that's a bit mean. Where's the PM? He's come out with what everybody wanted to be, let's be honest, that the parties on New Year's Eve can go ahead. I mean, he's damned if he doesn't, damned if he doesn't at the moment.
Well, I think he's damned if he does, if he doesn't, if you're the Daily Mirror. I mean, obviously, the Daily Mirror is a Labour supporting paper and it's completely opposed to Boris Johnson. And because it hasn't got any really good, juicy stories to go against Boris, they're going to do that one. I mean, actually, what they said is that he's left the Sarge, Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, to do all the work, while he and Carrie have their break at Chequers. And I think we know from pre-COVID times is that Boris Johnson really likes his breaks and doesn't really like doing the sort of day-to-day work of being Prime Minister.
He's just announced that people in England don't have to face any restrictions before the new year. And that, of course, is in contrast to what's happening in Scotland, in Wales and in Northern Ireland. And Benjamin, do you sense that the devolved governments, Nicola Sturgeon particularly, are going to say, ooh, have we jumped the gun here?
Well, it's certainly a gamble. I have to say, first of all, I really don't want to hear from Boris Johnson between the 24th and 28th of December, right? I think we all quite like having some time off from hearing from him. I think it's a real gamble on the politics and the public health of this COVID situation, because actually the devolved governments decided on their rules before you got to the evidence about how dangerous the COVID version was. So we know that it's 50 to 70% less likely to result in hospitalisations than the Delta variant, the previous version. Now, the devolved governments made the decisions before we had that data. The problem is that we're having about 100,000 new COVID cases a day at the moment. Well, that's more than double the number of Delta cases we were having. So you could end up with a situation where ICU beds have just as many people seriously ill with COVID because of the sheer scale, even if as an individual you're less likely to get it. Now, the only good news on that is that despite the fact we have 4 times as many people with COVID now than on this day last year, the number of people in ICU or in hospital with COVID is dramatically lower. So it is looking positive.
And Scarlett, of course, Benjamin touched on it there. It's looking positive in terms of people being, not so seriously sick in hospital at least. But there's another issue here, isn't it, which is the shortage of staff. We heard about it earlier in the travel industry, but there's also a fear in hospitals too. Some papers saying a third of NHS staff could be absent over the new year. That's a worry, isn't it?
No, it's a problem. I mean, obviously, COVID is everywhere, including NHS staff. If you catch it, you can't go to work. You have to isolate. I mean, even if you're not ill, and frankly, most people who've been getting COVID barely have symptoms. I mean, it's very, very low. But even so, you cannot go into work. And you certainly can't go into a hospital because hospitals are rife with it. That's where a lot of sick people going into hospital are then catching COVID. That is a problem. So you keep the nurses out. and the doctors and the porters and everybody, and then you can't have enough patients either. So you're in a lose-lose situation on health, because as long as you've got this incredibly infectious COVID and you can't work with it, that you're cancelling the other operations, the non-urgent stuff, everything like that. I mean, a friend of mine really, was worried she'd broken her ribs, was too embarrassed to go into A&E because she just felt she wasn't important enough. And that's been a problem all through the pandemic, and it's still going on now. So actually, the problems of the pandemic go way beyond, restrictions for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, and just to underline the political nature of all this, of course, it's all very well saying, well, hey, parties can go ahead in England. Not in London, because the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has cancelled New Year already, hasn't he?
He has. He's cancelled those fireworks that everyone likes watching and people watch around the world. I have to say, I have a vested interest in this because during the pandemic, I moved into a flat right by where those fireworks are. And last year I thought, well, that's fine. Next year I can see them. So now I've lived there for 2 years without getting to see the fireworks, despite having a balcony right by them. So he's ruined my flat by cancelling those fireworks. I think there's a question, though, about whether, on a serious note, on whether that was the right thing to do, because it's gathering outside. We know you're less likely to get COVID outside. And, is it at this stage of COVID, should we be learning to live with the virus in that way? He not only cancelled the fireworks, but then he cancelled a planned display in Trafalgar Square for key workers. And now there's going to be some kind of celebration in inverted commas, but no one will be able to watch it in person. So, I think a few people will be pretty peeved at that.
Scarlett, celebrations for some, certainly, and they'll be in the hospitality sector here in England. The Daily Mail said it's a huge boost for them.
Well, it's a huge boost as long as people go out. But the problem is, so, even on Christmas Day, you had restaurants saying there are no shows. People not even bothering to cancel, but just not turning up. This had gone on all through December. So what nobody knows is we're allowed to go out, we're allowed to go to restaurants, and in England we're allowed to go to nightclubs. But actually, is that what we're all going to do? Or are people actually so worried that they're going to stay home, and then the pubs and the restaurants won't be making as much money as frankly, they need to? They need New Year's Eve to keep them into what could be a slightly dry January. Whether we'll get rid of the concept of dry January so that we can all go out and drink.
I think if ever there's a January where you need a white wine, it's this January, quite francly.
Yeah. Benjamin, something else that's got you going, because you were tweeting about this, the Daily Mail, punch up at the hunt. You have to be careful how you say that. The traditional Boxing Day hunt. And there was some scuffle, well, more than scuffles, actually, because there was a video that these pictures are based on. Pretty grim.
Yeah, it is pretty grim. There was a big fight at a hunt in Wiltshire, and in the videos, it appears that some of the hunters are punching animal rights activists in the face. There's a woman that's seen being thrown to the ground. There's a sort of a mass brawl, is what you would call it. Just because they're in tweed, I don't think makes it any less appalling. And this is about those trail hunts. So obviously fox hunting has been banned since 2004, but you can still lay the scent of an animal and then they go and chase that. But a lot of animal rights activists say that actually that's just a smokescreen for real hunts, because the hounds don't know which one is the scent and which one is an actual fox, and so you end up getting them chasing the foxes and killing that.
And what's interesting is that Labour are calling for a ban of trail hunting for exactly that reason, and the Countryside Alliance says that Labour is losing the rural vote. But actually, in the towns and in the country, most people would like hunting banned. It is a sport for a small number of people, rather than town versus country at all. Lots and lots of country people find it awful. And the hounds go through their gardens, they kill their cats. You hear of... the hounds don't just go after foxes. They go after anything that gets in the way.
I do. The Countryside Alliance, we spoke to them for the newspaper in yesterday's paper, and they accused Labour of waging class warfare on people in the countryside. Well, I think that's. They also said people that are anti-hunting and anti-trail hunting don't do it because of a love of animals. They do it because they hate humans. I really think the Countryside Alliance is out of touch with the country on this one. Fox hunting in its full form is certainly opposed, and I think most people don't care for trail hunting. This is a sport for toffs that really I think the rest of the country doesn't care for and finds a bit ugly.
Well, a lot of people see it as a tradition, but you think it's a tradition we can do without.
Yeah, I do, to be honest, because that's the problem. When they're chasing a scent, they can just as easily end up chasing the scent of a real fox. And, the people that go trail hunting, we know that many of them are supporters of full-throttled fox hunting. There was a conviction in October of somebody who actually had done a proper fox hunt under the guise of a trail hunt. So clearly it's not always what it seems. And, the Tories, I think Theresa May said she wanted to bring back fox hunting in her election disaster a few years ago. But I don't think there's any appetite for that kind of stuff from the British public.
No. The only blood sport here is, this is the pay-per view, frankly. We've put you through it this morning. Thank you both very much. Scarlett McGuire, Benjamin Butterworth. Really good to see you both, and thank you for your time.
And that's it from us too. Thanks for your company this morning. Coming up is The Real Me with Gloria Di Piero. But first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
GBview